Welcome to today's Autistic Moment, a podcast for autistic adults by autistic adults. My name is Philip King Lowe. I am the owner, producer, and host, and I am an autistic adult. Thank you so very much for listening. Charlotte Bachelor is my guest to talk about Black autistics thriving in urban settings. Charlotte is going to share her story about growing up in Detroit, Michigan, with the intersecting identities of being Black and autistics. Charlotte has faced the challenges of finding support and understanding from professionals and peers due to her intersecting identities. Charlotte will also talk about the importance of community, allyship, and the need for safe spaces that impact discussions about racism and the urgent need for bystander intervention. Come join us for Black Autistics Thriving in Urban Settings on today's Autistic Moment. This first segment of today's Autistic Moment is sponsored by the Autism Society of Minnesota, known as Awesome throughout Minnesota's autism community. As Minnesota's first autism resource for more than 50 years, Awesome serves the whole state, the whole spectrum for the whole life. Visit awesome at ausm.org. In addition to the wonderful guests and conversations on today's Autistic Moment, you can find many more resources. Visit todaysautisticmoment.com to listen to over 120 episodes released since 2021. Check out the episode schedule 2026 to see upcoming topics, guest information, and program descriptions for Season 6. On the website, you can learn more about today's Autistic Moment, read the guest bios, explore the Adult Autism Resources links page, visit the Autistic Community Bulletin Board, read the blog, find out about TAM Autistic Consulting Services, sign up for a subscription to get ad-free interviews. Support today's Autistic Moment with a donation. Every episode, including this one, has a transcript. The transcripts are sponsored by Minnesota Independence College and Community. You can read the transcripts right on the website or download printable versions to help you save ink. The transcripts use a dyslexia-friendly font that are available in English, Spanish, German, French, and Chinese simplified. Want more interaction with today's Autistic Moment? Follow today's Autistic Moment on Facebook, including our community group page, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads. Also follow us on the YouTube channel at Today's Autistic Moment to watch Autistic Voices roundtable discussions, New episodes will be coming up in 2026. After this first commercial break, Charlotte Bachelor will join me to talk about Black Autistics thriving in urban settings. Today's Autistic Moment can be downloaded and heard on most podcast apps, including Apple, Google Play, Breaker, Castbox, Overcast, iHeartRadio, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Spotify, TuneIn, Pandora, Amazon Music, Audible, Podcast Addict, Podcast Chaser. If you are looking for the transcripts, go to todaysautisticmoment.com, click on the episode you want to listen to, and follow the directions to find the transcripts. Thank you for listening to today's Autistic Moment. Are you looking for a space where you don't have to explain your autism to be seen, heard, or understood? We are the Autistic Peer Support Coaching Collective, the world's first autistic-led peer support coaching organization. In a world that pathologizes our differences, isolates us, and pushes toxic individualism, APSCC offers something radical: community, connection, and care. Our coaches are all autistic adults, trained professionals, supporting our fellow autistics with tools for advocacy, regulation, and everyday thriving. We know how hard it is right now. Stigma, burnout, misinformation, it's everywhere. But you don't have to face it alone. Peer support is not just helpful, it's necessary. Community is not a luxury, it's how we survive. Showing up in our full autistic selves with our stims, our sensitivities, and our joy is an act of resistance. In a world that tells us to hide or disappear, we choose to be visible together. You'll find one-on-one coaching, free support groups, educational workshops, and more, all rooted in the neurodiversity paradigm, built by autistics for autistics. Come be part of something real. Visit autisticcoaches.com. Support for today's Autistic Moment comes from Best Care Home Care Agency. Best Care offers PCA services, and your friend or family member could be your paid PCA. Best Care also offers homemaking, FMS services, and 2, 4, 5D services throughout the Metro and Greater Minnesota. Visit their website, bestcaremn.com, to learn more about their services.
MICC provides transformative education and training for autistic and neurodivergent adults to live independently, work purposefully, and thrive in community. With hands-on learning and caring guidance, MICC participants accomplish things they never imagined, from daily living tasks like taking public transportation or managing finances, to building and sustaining a career and lifelong friendships. Learn more about our inclusive community in Richfield, Minnesota at micc.org.
I'm so excited to welcome Charlotte Bachelor back to today's Autistic Moment. Charlotte was on today's Autistic Moment to discuss autistic goal setting in September. The conversation was so outstanding, I knew I had to ask her to join us again. Charlotte Bachelor is a late diagnosed autistic ADHD writer and speaker from Detroit, Michigan. Charlotte began documenting her diagnostic journey as a student at Michigan State University, where she earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in professional and public writing with a minor in African American and African Studies. Charlotte's work focuses on uplifting the experience of Black disabled women and girls. Additionally, Charlotte completed the Disability Empower Expressions group and is a long-term trainee with the MI Lend program. Through Charlotte's powerful storytelling, she shares her unique perspectives to illuminate underrepresented stories and experiences. Please join me now as I welcome Charlotte Bachelor to today's Autistic Moment. Charlotte Bachelor, welcome back to today's Autistic Moment. I am so excited that you're here. Our conversation in September about goal setting was just fantastic. So I know this is going to be a great conversation today. So welcome back. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me again. I'm happy to be here.
As we are recognizing Black History Month in February and recognizing, at least on today's Autistic Moment, Black autistics and their contributions to society in terms of autism and also racism and intersectional cultures and that kind of thing. So that's what this conversation is about today. And I'm sure that your personal experiences of being a Black autistic woman in urban settings has indeed shaped a lot of your experience. I'm going to begin right away. What important information do you want to give to introduce our audience to what it is like to be a Black autistic thriving in an urban setting?
Yeah, so to start, I think I'll kind of set the scene of where I'm based out of. So I am based in Detroit, Michigan, born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, went to Michigan State up in East Lansing, grew up and kind of spent my adolescent years in Metro Detroit. But I think I really came into my own once I moved back to Detroit after graduating from college and being able to be in a space where, you know, there are people who look like me. There are autistic adults who may or may not share the same experiences I have, parents and caregivers and professionals, you know, who want to work or who are accustomed to working with Black autistic individuals. So just to set the scene, I like to tell people that I am Black before anything else. I am Black before I'm autistic, disabled, neurodivergent. That is the first thing most people notice about me when I enter a room, and I can't escape that fact. I can't take off my Black skin at the end of the day. So everything I experience, you know, there are some people who are like, well, you know, we don't have to talk about race and autism. Autism is autism across the board, which inherently is untrue because it's a spectrum. But I think, you know, being a Black woman has definitely played a large role in how my autistic traits are perceived and kind of why it probably took so long for me to get diagnosed. And I think coming back home to Detroit, being around other Black women has really kind of helped me find my place in the world, and creating content surrounding the experiences of Black autistic women and girls have really helped ground me in my advocacy work.
What were some of the challenges you found yourself really having to meet?
So I would say the biggest challenge not to be, oversimplified as racism, like, most of the time when you're looking for, neuropsych or other evaluators, there's typically not a whole lot of Black women. When you go to autism support groups or things for autistic adults, there are typically not a lot of Black women. I remember specifically in college, even though I was, on social media openly, proudly identifying as a disabled person, I did not, interact with Council of Students with Disabilities at my school because I knew it was overwhelmingly white. And I had had some microaggressive incidents with students in that kind of sphere of my college campus. Not to say I have plenty of Black and brown women who I know are disabled, who are, my close friends and confidants, but it's hard because it's like, even though we should be able to relate on the aspect of autism, some people can't understand how race plays into that. And a perfect example of this is I was once on an app designed for autistic individuals to meet friends and date and whatnot. And I was like, okay, I've seen a couple ads. Let me download the app. And I go to the discussion forum. So there's people talking about movies, TV, video games, whatever. And there's someone in there trying to make a moral justification for chattel slavery. And I was like, this is not the place for me, because there are some things that don't need to be, debated. If you have an interest in learning the history behind that, that's fine. But for people to feel comfortable debating it and trying to make it an issue of semantics, So I already know that a lot of my spaces, I'm going to be the one, the only, or a few. So I try really hard to find spaces with people who either share my lived experience, which Black autistic women are kind of a subset of a subset, or people who are willing to learn and grow and kind of have a flexible mindset. So I don't deal with racism. I don't deal with microaggressions. And I try not to put myself into positions where, I could feel that my integrity would be compromised, or I feel like I'm going to be talked down upon, gawked at, or be told that I am derailing conversations because, I'm saying that race is a factor.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because the disability community and the autistic community has this phrase, nothing about us without us.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, when individuals of diverse races get into those spaces, it's interesting how nothing about us without us becomes nothing about us, but that doesn't include you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, well, we're all disabled, so the race stuff, the socioeconomic stuff, the gender stuff, we just, but we can't ignore the intersectional reality that we live in, and that there are multiple factors impacting the way people receive care, the treatment they get, the type of services they're afforded, how they're treated by healthcare professionals, how they're seen as their peers. And I hate to say this, but someone being autistic, that does not automatically excuse you from being racist. There are a lot of people who think that because they are autistic, they have a moral high ground. And sure, I want to see the best in everyone, but I've experienced racist autistic people, and I'm probably not the only Black one. I've seen autistic people be misogynistic and all kinds of other things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's less of, autistic people are people, and they are, they can have moral failings, or, or promote injustice in other ways. So I think people really have to examine themselves that, like, yes, you are disabled. You understand what it's like to be marginalized. However, there is also a subset of people, Black American people, who have suffered for a very long time in this country. And there are, consistent systemic barriers dating back to the colonial period on why Black people in America are treated the way they are.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's easy to understand that, to read that in a textbook, but to really digest that and to maybe realize that, hey, I'm not supporting diverse voices, or I'm not listening to Black autistic women. I think it's one thing for people to understand, but then actually to display that allyship as a verb is where the real, unlearning really begins.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about some of your urban experiences, about certain parts of even where you are, where even among your Black communities, are there other places where it's safer to stim in those places? Are there other places where it's not so safe? Do you have to navigate places where your intersectional identities are safer versus others? Do you find that happening where you are?
So I would say it's like anything, time and audience for me. Just like a lot of Black people learn how to code switch depending on the environment they're in and who's around. You kind of, for Black autistic people, masking can be a tool for survival. So if they're, for example, my first job out of college, I don't know if I've told this story on here, but I was outed as being disabled because a supervisor saw something on my personal Instagram page and brought that information to me at work in front of my other colleagues. And mind you, in this case, I was working as a city event coordinator. So I'm doing festivals, large scale, easy 10, 15, 20,000 people in a weekend. It's a very, even if you're not autistic, it's a lot of moving parts. And so, when this person, told me, they were like, well, you've been through so much and blah, 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 and we can start doing some stuff for the community. When I shared that I was burning out or I needed a mental health day or, hey, this is too much, I was met with, there are no mental health days in sick time. And if you're calling out sick, then there's a problem or you're getting written up. So eventually I left that job, and that was one of the first times I experienced autistic burnout. And I did not work a full-time job until left that job in January of 2024. I didn't work full-time again until June of 2024. I had a couple of freelance contracts and was doing a few other things, but it's just like anywhere else. There are some people who are willfully ignorant about autism and disabilities. And even when presented with a disabled person who says, hey, this is what I need so my needs are met, they refuse it. A lot of times in the circles I run in, which is a lot of special education advocacy and a lot of parent support groups, a lot of people have not met a late diagnosed autistic adult. Most people I know, their children were diagnosed kind of at that like 2 to 5 range as children. So I remember going to a special education advocacy group and one of the moms saying, I don't mean to sound ignorant, but I didn't know you could be diagnosed as an adult. And oftentimes we're not, Black women are not, let's be real, Black women are not the face of late diagnosed autistic adults 9 times out of 10. So when I go to these parent groups, I'm actually given a lot of warm reception. It's like, yeah, let's talk about this. I want my kid to go to college one day. I want my kids to be able to live an interdependent life and do all these things. So when they see me out in the community working, being a young adult, that gives them a lot of hope for their young adult, that there are areas of support and with the right people and the right things in place, they can thrive. So I would say, I honestly, some of my greatest allies who support my work here on the ground are parent advocates and, parent focused groups, because there aren't a lot of, I would say, groups for young autistic 20 somethings here in the city. Now that's an initiative I would like to start for young women down the line. But oftentimes I'm with people who maybe are 10, 15, 20 years my senior. But they share their stories about their child or loved one. We're able to find some common ground. And from there, we kind of work together and share resources. So I would say here in the city, I have mainly, symbiotic relationships with a lot of groups on the ground, because in Detroit, there aren't a lot of resources for my community. Most parents, if they want resources or assistance with their child, they have to go outside of city limits. So for me, it's, I know I'm kind of a niche of a niche here in the city, but I'm willing to work with people who are willing to, we may not agree, we may not have the same level of knowledge or the same experiences. But what I found is that these parents want to do right by little Black boys and Black autistic girls. So they're going to, work together to make that dream happen.
Yeah, that's exciting. Thank you for sharing that. In this time when there is an increase in racism being so accepted, and, that Black autistics, male or female for this sense of the word, are finding that increased social acceptance of both ableism, racism, and people wanting to step back from the advances made by the infrastructure the autistic community has built. How do you see the Black autistics in your urban area thriving?
So one thing I will say is that, to push back on what you said, the racism has always been here. Like, as a Black autistic person, like, straight up, the first time I got called the N-word, I was 14 in high school by a fellow classmate who thought it was funny. So for me, the racism has always been here. I mean, people feel more empowered now, but it's always been here in very nasty, little insidious ways that might not get global attention. But I remember being a student at MSU and Black girls were having nooses hung on their dorm doors. This was what, 2018, 2019?
Oh my.
And this is, and mind you, Black people only make up about 7% of the MSU student population. This is a school with over 50,000 people. So the racism has always been there. I think some people who are not as impacted by racism, it's now in their front door. It's now in the newspapers. It's now people feel louder and prouder. But for me, it's always been there, and it's always been in the back of my mind. And unfortunately, it is a fact of life. We live in a racist society. So keeping that in the back of your mind, you learn that at a very, very, young age. And just to kind of go on my family history, my grandfather was a sharecropper in the South. So to give the context of, racism, my grandparents were in their early 20s during the race riots in Detroit. My grandmother was in nursing school. So, I don't want to say like that trauma is passed down, but that history isn't so far behind us. We have people who are, living testaments to that, how do I say this? You still want to live life. You still want to have friends, have relationships, be a part of a faith community. You still have dreams and goals and aspirations. And I think Black autistic people have chosen to thrive in spite of what's going on. That's an act of resistance. People say joy is an act of resistance. It's an act of resistance to say, I want to have a future and I want to be here in a country that has, essentially spat on your ancestors for the last 250 years. So,
Okay.
I mean, I enter spaces knowing I'm probably going to be the only one, but if I can make a way for someone else, or I might find someone else who feels like they're the only one, and another person, and another person, and then we can kind of all come together to make a way for other Black autistic individuals. And I mean, there are plenty of online spaces, Instagram pages, Facebook groups, conferences. There are many places where we are, even though we might be spread out geographically. But I mean, the resistance is people are still getting up and going to work every day. They're still protesting in whatever way. They're speaking out in whatever way. They're making art. They're still doing things that make them happy. And they're not just, face down under the pillow, under the bed saying, it's not going to get better. But I think that joy as a resistance is innately a part of Black culture and Black people here in America, given, our history. So I think we continue to live lives, I don't want to say average lives, but, we go to the grocery store, we have friends, we sometimes cry, we sometimes have days where we don't leave the house. But most autistic Black people I see are still getting up and choosing to, speak up for what they believe in, and are still continuing to advocate even in this very precarious time that we live in.
I always appreciate the full answers you give to my questions. I think they are really great for our audience to hear the whole story, if you will. So thank you so much for your answers. That's so great. After this next commercial break, Charlotte and I will talk about Black Autistics thriving and not just surviving as the intersectional communities look for allyship. We will make the point that being an ally is a verb. That means action, as Black Autistics have a target on their backs and require resources to thrive. Autistic adults aren't getting the support we need. It affects our health, our income, financial stability, and our ability to live independently. ITI Assistive Technologies is changing that. This autistic-led team has created Decide with tools built for neurodivergent minds. One lets users quickly pick from custom lists based on their energy level. The other guides them through big decisions using simple agree-disagree statements that match their values. Visit itiassist.com/decide for more information about downloading the app to get all features for just $5 a month.
Hello, autism community. My name is Lisa Morgan. I'm an autistic adult too, and I know firsthand what it feels like to be unintentionally harmed by well-meaning professionals when reaching out for help. My passion is to help autistic people find and use their own unique strengths to help themselves. Are you rule-based, a literal thinker, have a focused interest? Let's figure out together how to use the strengths of autism to find solutions. I offer life coaching for autistic adults and individualized workshops for professionals. To find out more, go to autismcrisissupport.com.
In 2026, today's Autistic Moment will bring you guests who will highlight how autistics thrive in these challenging times by recognizing the incredible strengths we have to raise the bar through hard conversations and community building. Stand up for autistics thriving with your assistance to today's Autistic Moment. Support today's Autistic Moment in any of the following ways. Make a one-time donation through the coffee icon, that's KO-FI icon, when you tap on Support Today's Autistic Moment on todaysautisticmoment.com. Subscribe monthly via Patreon. Purchase items at Today's Autistic Moments logo shop. Share today's Autistic Moment with your family, friends, coworkers, and others through social media and or by telling others about us. Donations are not tax deductible, but help keep today's Autistic Moment as a safe space. Thank you for supporting today's Autistic Moment. Welcome back. We are talking with Charlotte Bachelor about Black autistics thriving in urban settings. Before the break, we talked about Charlotte's experiences of living in Detroit, Michigan, where her race is in the room before her autistic identity is. Now we're going to talk about intersectional communities and allyship. My theme this year is Autistic thriving, not just surviving, and you've been talking really well about that. In the last 2 years, I've really been focusing on the intersectional identities that make up who autistic people are. And, these include, of course, our LGBT people. These include multiply neurodivergent people. Which includes PTSD and ADHDers and any other way that our neurodivergence is mixed, and, urban settings can have their pockets of places where things are different. And so, I've heard of others I know of one Black autistic man who lives in Chicago. And he literally has to be very careful about what neighborhoods he walks in and how he stims, even among his own people, because it may not be safe for him to do that. Or he has to be in a particular place where he can stim because it's simply not safe for him to do it in another place entirely. I mean, he finds himself in places where everything about him is, as you have said in the past, already there before he opens his mouth. So, he thrives, and yet he does more than thrive. He survives in those spaces by just accepting who he is, where he is, but also where he has to be to stay safe, which sometimes it's a false sense of security, I know, but we are here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and we have a horrid situation right now where recent weeks ago, an autistic woman of color was picked up by ICE, who could be clearly heard saying that she is autistic and has a brain injury. She was on her way to a doctor's appointment. That's the only thing she was doing. And yet, the people who arrested her, the people who commented about her, were all making statements about she did something to break the law, which we know is not at all true. And we know that, these are things that autistic people in urban neighborhoods really fear, these things happening in their communities. And so I guess I'm trying to say, how are the Black autistics in your urban settings dealing with possibilities like that happening?
That's a great question. I'm going to take a minute to kind of marinate on that. I think as a Black person, interacting with law enforcement, there is always the chance that it could go sideways.
Right.
Now, with the context of what's going on, now more than ever. So parents have always had to have conversations, autistic or not. This is what happens when you get pulled over. I remember being 13 or 14, and at church, we had a local police officer and a lawyer come in to teach us, young Black adolescents and adults. This is what happens if you're pulled over. This is what happens if you're stopped. This is how you ask for help. And this is how you make it a quote unquote safe encounter, as safe as, a Black person interacting with the police force can be. So I know a lot of parents here on the ground, and not only in Detroit, but in metro areas. There are a lot of parent organizations trying to work with law enforcement and local authorities to do trainings and awareness about, people on the autism spectrum and some of their stimming behaviors. Or I think now they're even trying to get a special alert system set up. So if an autistic person elopes, and what to do in that situation if you find someone who's eloped and maybe they're nonverbal or in a shutdown, or cannot verbally communicate to you what's going on, because elopement is a huge danger for autistic people. I think, we're doing our best to try to stay safe. I don't want to say safety is not a guarantee as a Black person in America. So whatever sense of safety means to someone, that's such an individual thing. But I think people are just trying to stay aware of what their rights are, stay together if they're going out and protesting or, acting as legal observers. I think people are trying to stay as safe as possible. And I think that's when bystander intervention comes in for allies, for white allies, for non-Black allies. If you're out and something happens, you might need to call for backup. Or if you see someone let's say someone goes to a protest and you have someone from the opposite side and they're starting something, you might need to hop in the middle of that. Black people already have a target on our back. And this is when I say allyship is a verb. It means sometimes allies will have to do scary things like speaking up in the moment or interjecting in that moment. Like, I remember being a teenager at high school and me getting called the N-word at the lunch table and no one said anything. Everyone was laughing and joking like it was normal. And then I had people afterwards, well, that wasn't right. That wasn't cool. So-and-so shouldn't have said that. Black people don't need people in their comments and DMs after a tragedy has already happened. There are a million eyes on these situations. We need people willing to act right now. And like, I think referring to the gentleman in your previous anecdote, one of the biggest things my family has taught me, be aware of your surroundings, knowing where you're at, knowing where you are, especially as a young woman, having that sort of safety and awareness about where I go and who I'm with. And, I've grown up in Detroit, so I am, for better or worse, used to this environment. So I would say that I have a great, a general idea of, I'm not walking to the gas station by myself at night. That's a no-go. Or, let's not stop at this gas station. Let's stop at somewhere else. Or if a man is catcalling or accosting me, I'm just going to give a nod, because I know if I verbally go back and forth, that might not end well for me. So there are certain things I feel like a lot of Black autistic people have been taught by their family who have grown up in that situation, a lot of self-awareness, but also in some interactions, there needs to be bystander interventions and allies willing to, kind of step it up and act in real life when they see these acts of racism or microaggressions. And it doesn't even have to be out in the street protesting. If you're in a social group and someone says something inappropriate or is talking over a Black woman or is, engaging negatively, it doesn't take much to say, hey, that's not cool. Let her finish, or let him finish, or, I think that's racist, right? Easier said than done, but allyship is not about comfortability. It's about getting uncomfortable in the face of your beliefs, because Black people have to be uncomfortable in America every day of their lives. So, that's just the nature of that.
And speaking for us white people, we're so, quote, comfortable because we think we're safe, period. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's one of those things that those of us who are here in the Twin Cities with everything that's going on, we're learning, guess what? We're not necessarily safe just because anymore. No. We've seen the kinds of horrors that can happen when our community is a target of political, sociological, socioeconomical, agendas. And, we're seeing, just a few weeks ago, a 7-year-old who had found asylum in the U.S., who happened to be in Minneapolis, was taken and kept as bait for other people of color so that they could arrest them. We're seeing these things played out in our communities. And we've seen, people who are white who have been dragged out of their homes. They've been kept in places far, far away from us. We even had one person who died while they were in custody. So I think this is a time, and I'm going to say this as gently but as honestly as possible, that we are learning that when one group of people is targeted, no one is really safe. And that's one of those things that, I don't know if this will make you laugh or not. Those of us who are not people of color are having to learn about what Black people go through, if you will, because we are now experiencing that, even if it's on a micro moment. We're learning what it means to be targeted just because of who you are. Just because of what family you come from, just because of, what community you just happen to be part, whatever the issue. But it feels a little bit like the pandemic in some cases. It was like, you will listen and you will learn now because it affects you too. And while that doesn't change everything, it certainly is an educational kind of thing.
It's an educational kind of thing, and it'll be interesting to see, who really learns this lesson, right? Like, so many people, I don't want to say have a false sense of safety, but, oh, I live in this neighborhood, or I'm in this zip code or this county. I'm not in, geographical community with Black and brown people. So that would never happen in my community. That never say never. That's all I'm going to say. Violence does not know a zip code. Hatred, bigotry does not know a zip code, a county, a city, a subdivision, or a neighborhood. And, Black and brown people, have raised the alarm, have, said that this is going to happen. And for some people, they thought they were excluded from that. But unfortunately, experiencing bigotry and political upheaval is a group assignment that nobody can opt out of. Everybody is going to face, and I don't say that in like a fear-mongering way, but people are going to be impacted. Even if you don't think you're going to be impacted, everyone is going to be impacted in this kind of way. And I even say this, that when the raids started happening, we had sorority sisters, I'm in a multicultural sorority, saying, my father's been taken. My fiance's gone. We have frat brothers who have been taken, who are raising money. People who have legally been in the U.S. Gone. Families trying to raise $40,000, $50,000 to get in front of a judge to plead their case. Gone like that. So it's ignorant to say, well, because I'm whatever identity, this doesn't impact me. Oh, it impacts all of us. And I think the sooner people realize it, like, it's a very bitter pill to swallow, but this is a group project. And the only way to survive is, we understand that oppression is bad, but understanding how are we going to go against this, right? Because being passive is not going to get you anywhere. And not saying that everyone even has the same lanes in political organizing and advocacy, but people quickly have to learn that if you have to be willing to stand for something nowadays. Yeah. Being middle of the road, being neutral, that is not, we're talking life and death here. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because those are things I have alluded to in my work before. But unfortunately, because I'm a Black woman, when I say those types of things, it's fear-mongering or being critical or being negative or making everything about race. So sometimes those things, like that thing you just said, it comes better when people hear it from people in their community. So I hope your listeners really listen. And if you don't take anything else away from this podcast, that last little 5-minute clip, that is your new reality. And now it is up to you to figure out how to proceed. And I can't tell people how to act. I can provide suggestions. But yeah, it's very scary when you realize privilege can only protect you for so long.
Right. And the thing is that we tend to think that it's the big things that create these walls, that create these biases. I happen to think those little jokes that we've learned to accept, those little things that we just learned to pass off, oh, that was nothing serious and stuff like that. All of that is building us to these points of time. And, and especially for autistics, autistic people of color, transgender people right now, this is all not okay. This is not normal. This is not safe for anybody. And so the sooner all of us in the U.S. realize that we do have a responsibility of some kind to each other, and that we are community no matter where we are or what we do. We really do. When we protect one of us, or speak out for one of us, we speak out for everybody, however we choose to do that. After this final commercial break, Charlotte will share some resources for Black autistic adults, children, and elderly people. After we conclude the interview, today's Autistic Community Bulletin Board will follow. On February 24, 2011, a psychologist shared the results of an evaluation I did with him and told me that I had Asperger's syndrome. I went through a 4-year period of feeling relieved, confused, happy, grieving, and felt totally lost in my life all at the same time. In 2017, I found the Autism Society of Minnesota, and it changed my life. I started learning about autism, meeting other autistic people, and discovering the local autism community. Since then, I have accepted that I am autistic and the person I am supposed to be. If you were recently told that you have autism, you need a consultant who knows how your life is being impacted so you can connect with the autistic community to find resources and support. Go to todaysautisticmoment.com and read about TAM Autistic Consulting Services. If interested, please fill out the intake form and make an appointment so that we can begin working together.
Does it feel like all your support systems are in separate silos? Does it seem like there are mixed messages and you don't know which way to turn? Being part of a system is hard. It would be helpful to have the tools in your life toolbox to help navigate those silos. Looking Forward Life Coaching can provide support to fill that toolbox to prepare you to bridge those silos. Being person-centered, Looking Forward Life Coaching equips an individual to advocate for their needs. With coaching one-on-one, bridging the gap between the silos of services, you can feel more confident that your needs and desires are met. If you would like more information or would like to schedule a free meet and greet, please visit our website at www.lookingforwardlc.org or call us at 612-504-7414. Looking Forward Life Coaching helps change stumbling blocks of life into stepping stones towards success.
I am in need of a guest for the episode Black Autistics Thriving in Rural Settings on February 22nd. Urban settings and rural settings are different not just because of geographic location, traffic flow, and the size of the population. Black autistic people experience ableism by the attitudes of those who do not think that they should be there because of the issues of race and ableism and how they find resources for supports. If this sounds like a topic you would like to be a guest for, please send an email to todaysautisticmoment@gmail.com. On the chance that I am unable to find a guest, I will be producing an updated rerun on February 22nd of the episode Black Autistic Adults Stop the Whitewashing with my guest Precious Leslie. The autistic and disability movements have a saying, "Nothing about us without us." Yet many Black autistics have experienced the kind of pushback that suggests that they are not included in those words. Precious Leslie is a Black autistic woman who shares her first-hand experience to help us hear her out. The shows for March will be announced on the episode on February 22nd. Thank you for listening to today's Autistic Moment. Charlotte Bachelor is about to share some resource recommendations for Black Autistics. After that will be today's Autistic Community Bulletin Board. My final question for you, Charlotte, is, are there resources that we can help people reach out to, especially Black Autistics who may be in urban neighborhoods who need to find safe spaces, who need to find those places to help them thrive? Do you have any recommendations that you'd like to give?
So, because I'm located in Detroit, unfortunately, there's not a million Charlottes running around across the U.S. The biggest organization I can think of is Autism in Black. They are having an in-person conference in West Palm Beach, Florida, April 17th through the 19th. I've spoken there several times before. The conference will also be live streamed, but they have a great, very small, intimate group. I believe they have a membership organization where they have places where their members can come together, share resources, not just for Black autistic adults, but for parents, caregivers, special education advocates, teachers, whoever. If you are a Black autistic person, care for a Black autistic person, or are an ally to Black autistic people, they have a ton of great resources, and I've met a ton of great people. Another resource I'm going to recommend, this is specifically for Black autistic women. The podcast is Black Girl Diagnosed, and it's hosted by a Black autistic advocate who was diagnosed later in life. She does a ton of great work. I feel like the thoughts I have, she's able to get them out quicker into social media and into articles quicker than I can, because I don't do advocacy work full time. But please look up Black Girl Diagnosed. If I have to, I will email you her name and you can put it in the show notes. But those are the two biggest things I can think of now. And just looking up hashtag Black Autistic Adult on YouTube, hashtag Autism. I have a YouTube channel called Charlotte Says. I put out YouTube shorts called Bonnet Chronicles. It's about being a Black autistic woman in America. They're short little 30-second to a minute long clips, short little anecdotes from my day. People might find them comforting. It's not a whole deep dive like a podcast. It's not the most academic thing, but it is a way that I share and build community. But just if you look up Black autistic adults in your area, you'll be surprised to what you'll find. I would reach out to the ARC in your city or your community. The Developmental Disabilities Council in your state might be able to help. There are other organizations. Unfortunately, I wish I had more resources to provide, but unfortunately, Black folks are used to building their own table and building their own communities. So I'm pretty sure there are probably tens of hundreds of other groups that I might not be aware of that are out there, doing the work.
Last September, when you were on Today's Autistic Moment you spoke of a project that you are part of. Can you share with us how that's going?
So I was on the project just for the promotional period. They are still working out for hashtag Autistic Out Loud. So please follow their website and Instagram for the most current dates. I heard that there might be a trailer dropping soon for that. But yeah, support hashtag Autistic Out Loud when that project comes out, because that project is going to feature people, Black elderly people on the spectrum, all the way down to parents and caregivers and young children. And that's not really a story that's often told, especially with our Black elders or autistic elders in general. But especially Black autistic people. But I highly encourage you. The webinar series is still up on YouTube, free for everyone to watch. Hashtag Autistic Out Loud. I believe there's a 6 or 7 part webinars. They're about an hour and a half each. They're timeless. They cover employment, education, mental health and well-being, Black autistic joy. So if you're a parent, a caregiver, a self-advocate, an ally, or someone who just wants to learn more, that would be a great place to start. That was really a labor of love with myself and the Autistic Out Loud team. So I would highly encourage anyone to check out the webinar series while we eagerly await the trailer and the release of the documentary.
Yeah, that sounds so exciting. I'm so glad that you and the others who put that together are part of that. That resource is already available on the Adult Autism Resources links page on todaysautisticmoment.com. Please go there, find that resource, and go and see what's going on over there. There's lots of great stuff. So, Charlotte Bachelor, thank you so very much for taking this time to talk with us. You know, every time I talk to you, I learn a lot from you myself. And, you know, I work hard to be a listener so that I can learn too. So I want to thank you so much for, you know, helping me understand things better than I did before I started my interview. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your stories of your life, your projects, your history, and you know, helping us to gain the understanding about what's happening in your life. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you for having me once again. I really do appreciate any time I get to come and speak and teach. I'm always receptive to people who are wanting to listen and learn. So thank you.
You're welcome. Would you like to listen to this conversation with Charlotte Bachelor with no segmentation or ads? Sign up for a subscription to ad-free interviews on todaysautisticmoment.com. The subscription is only $12 a month or $144 for a whole year. Once you buy the subscription, you can click on any show where you see the logo for Today's Autistic Moment ad-free interviews to hear only the interview without interruption, segmentation, and music. You can listen to all ad-free interviews going back to July 2025 and all upcoming episodes. Today's Autistic Community Bulletin Board. All these events and many others, such as sensory-friendly concerts, art activities, and museum information links are available on todaysautisticmoment.com/bulletin board. The Adult Coffee Club for Autistic Adults in Minnesota are held on the second Tuesday of every month, weather permitting, at Dogwood Coffee, located at 2700 University Avenue West, Suite 100 in St. Paul, Minnesota. The zip code for your GPS is 55114. The adult coffee clubs will begin at 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. on February 10th, March 10th, no coffee club in April, May 12th, June 9th. Understanding Autism virtual classes are offered by the Autism Society of Minnesota. The next classes will be February 9th, 12 to 1 p.m., March 9th, 6 to 7 p.m., April 13th, 10 to 11 a.m., May 11th, 12 to 1 p.m., June 8th, 6 to 7 p.m. The Autism Society of Minnesota invites you to Family Fun Day at We Rock the Spectrum on Saturday, February 28th, beginning at 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. The event will be at We Rock the Spectrum, located at 1020 1020 Discovery Road, number 127, Eagan, Minnesota 55121. Registration is open to attend the Minnesota Virtual Autism Conference April 15th through the 16th, 2026. Register to get access to all conference, keynote, and breakout sessions, plus access to session recordings for a full month so you can revisit content on your own schedule. Go to ausm.org to get more information about these and other social and recreational programs, educational events, counseling services, and support groups at the Autism Society of Minnesota. Min Neurodivergent is a social club rooted in a vision of bringing neurodivergent Minnesotans together to build meaningful connections. Its core principle is to foster an environment where all are treated with dignity and respect regardless of ability or preferences. Go to their website, minneurodivergent.org, for more information, become a member, volunteer, and attend their events. The Autistic Self-Advocacy Network is now accepting applications for the 2026 Autism Campus Inclusion ACI Leadership Academy that will be held virtually Monday, July 13th through Sunday, July 19th, 2026. Use the link on this episode's transcript, ASON 2026 ACI Leadership Academy, or go to the Autistic Community Bulletin Board on todaysautisticmoment.com for more information. Today's Autistic Moment is here because of the generosity of supporters and sponsors. Go to todaysautisticmoment.com and select Support Today's Autistic Moment to donate. If you have questions about today's Autistic Moment, please send an email to todaysautisticmoment@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to Today's Autistic Moment, a podcast for autistic adults by an autistic adult. May you have an autistically amazing day. All of the guests meet with me on Zoom to record the interviews. The interview transcripts are provided by Otter. The podcast is prepared and edited on WavePad Masters Edition by NCH Software. The podcast is published by Spotify for Podcasters. The music that you hear is licensed to Today's Autistic Moment by PremiumBeat.com.